Hey guys, and welcome to another harmony lesson. I'm Kristen, your paperless piano teacher, and today we're going to be talking about musical forms, specifically targeting binary and ternary form. So let's start by just simply defining those two words. Binary means something that's composed of or involving two parts, and ternary means something that's composed of three parts. So why do we even use musical form? Well, I want you to think about this like it's an outline or a way to structure a piece of music, kind of like how you plan on an essay or a well-crafted introductory paragraph. In order to be able to confidently identify a piece's form, you do first need to know a couple of things. One, that phrases are often 4 measures long. I want you guys to use this as a way to look for cadences. There are times where phrases may be longer or shorter, but this can be a starting point. And the second thing is, what is a musical period, contrasting and parallel? And what are the cadences that are common for phrase 1 and phrase 2? Being confident in both of these things is going to help speed things up and ensure that your answer is accurate. All right, so let's hop right into our forms. I want to start with binary form. There are 3 kinds of binary forms. And as we work through each one, I'll compare them to the one previous so that you're able to easily identify the differences between the 3. Simple binary form is the first one. This is a simple 2-part structure. At this level, it also typically involves 2 musical periods, each ending with its own repeat sign, so that the musical period or section is self-contained. Section A could be contrasting or a parallel period. Phrase 1 is almost always a half cadence in the original key, but it could also be an authentic cadence. Phrase 2 ends with a half cadence in the home key or an authentic cadence in the dominant key. Modulation is very common, so I want you guys to look out for accidentals to give you a clue as to whether we've remained in the home key with that half cadence or we've modulated to the dominant with an authentic cadence. There will almost always be a repeat sign here. Section B is usually a contrasting period and also contrasts with section A. That's its purpose. There may be similar rhythmic patterns or melodic patterns, but there will be no exact repetition of section A. This is how simple binary contrasts with the other 2 types of binary. Section B is completely different. This musical period follows the same common cadence structure as phrase 1 by ending with a half cadence and phrase 2 ending with an authentic cadence in the home key. Another reminder that if a piece begins with a pickup or an upbeat, subsequent phrases often begin with a similar pickup. This is going to help you correctly identify which notes are cadence notes and which notes belong to the following phrase. All right, rounded binary is our next form. This is one of the most beloved and used forms. Sonata form is actually a more complex version of rounded binary, so understanding the simplified version is going to aid you in understanding sonata form in the next level. Rounded binary can often be confused with ternary form because section A is going to return at the end. So what I'm going to do is start by explaining rounded binary, and then when we hit ternary form later, I'm going to discuss the differences there. All right, so we're beginning with section A just like we did in simple binary. Its cadences are also very similar. The first phrase can cadence with an authentic, but a half cadence is also possible, and that second phrase typically modulates and cadences with an authentic in the new key, but again, a half cadence or an authentic cadence in the original key is also possible. There's also typically a repeat sign here. Section B can vary in length. Sometimes it's a single phrase with section A returning on the second phrase, and sometimes it can be a complete 2-phrase musical period and a longer section A returning like we have in this example here. What's important is 2 things. The repeat signs for this section contain section B and the return of A as one. They're repeated together. And the return of A is the beginning of section A. That's a really important distinction here. The final type of binary form is balanced binary. This is a combination of simple and rounded binary. It's a 2-part form with repeat signs surrounding each section. Cadences follow similar patterns to the previous ones. But what's different here is how section A returns at the end. It's not a complete statement, and it's the end of the original section A, not the beginning. It can be the complete phrase, or it can be only the cadence. But again, it is the ending that returns, which essentially helps to balance the piece out, which is why it's called balanced binary. To identify this on the score with labels, we're going to use an asterisk in both section A and section B when that similar material returns. So we're not actually going to label the return of section A at the end as section A. Now, one thing I do want you to watch out for here is modulation. Since section A often modulates, it's very possible that the cadences will be in different keys, but everything else is going to be exactly the same. So because of this, we're still considering them balanced binary because the material is the same, the key is just different. So those are our three forms of binary forms. We've got simple binary, which is just A and then a contrasting section of section B with no repeat material. Rounded binary is A, B, A, where B and the return of A are repeated together or grouped together, and the return of A is the beginning. And we've got balanced binary, which is an AB form again, with the end of A returning at the end of the piece. Our final form is ternary form. This form also contains a section A and a B, and a return of A at the end, just like rounded binary. But what's different here is that in ternary form, each section, including the repeat, is self-contained, meaning that the repeated signs surround the individual sections, or there are no repeat signs. Section A is just completely rewritten out. Whereas in rounded binary, section B and the return of A are repeated together. A great example of a common piece that you might come across in your own playing is a scherzo in trio or a minuet in trio. If you've played piano RCM 8, there's a great selection in list C. So what happens here is that section A can be completely written out, but what composers will often do or editors will often do is put a DC al fine sign at the end of the trio, or a DC scherzo or a DC minuet, which essentially means to go back and repeat the scherzo or the minuet over again. So ternary has three sections, A, B, and the return of A, and each section is self-contained. All right, finally, let's talk about how you're going to identify these. So you're sitting there with an empty score in front of you. What do? Well, the first thing I want you to do is look for repeat signs. This is going to help you section things off and not feel super overwhelmed. If there's no repeat signs, there are a couple of other things you can look for. Sometimes, especially in something like a minuet and trio or a ternary form, there will be an actual key change in the piece. Or you could look for the double bar line, thin double bar lines. Sometimes that will section things off for you, but there's usually an indicator in the score. The second thing you can do is label your phrases right away. So start by looking at that 4-measure phrase, again, keeping an eye out for pickups and starting your phrases with similar pickups, and then label your cadences and the key. You're going to know it's a cadence because the chords are going to make sense for cadence chords. Authentic is that 5-1 progression, cadential 6/4s are possible, half cadences are going to end with 5, and the last note is often a bit longer, or there's a break in the melody with a rest, because a cadence is going to be a point of rest or conclusion. So you're going to see that in the music. If you aren't able to find a cadence at that 4-measure mark, then you can start to look a bit ahead or a little bit before until you see that cadence. And again, remembering that phrases typically start the same way with similar patterns, similar intervals, so that can help you identify when a new phrase is starting as well. The third and final thing I want you to do is start to label things. So let's start by labeling section A at the beginning because we know it occurs there. Now what I want you to do is compare section A with section B, and we're going to ask ourselves some questions as we go. So we're going to just take phrase by phrase with section A and section B and look for any repetition. If there's no repetition, you've got simple binary. Do you see a DC al fine, DC scherzo, or DC minuet? If so, we've got our ternary form. If you're seeing repetition, I want you to look for what is repeated and where are the repeat signs. So if it's the complete section and the repeat signs are not requiring B and the return of A repeated together, then we've got, again, another example of ternary form. If the beginning of A is returning and it's repeated with section B, you've got rounded binary. If the end of A is returning at section B, you've got balanced binary. All right, guys, and that is it. Those are all of the musical forms you need to know for your RCM Harmony 9 exams. If you guys have any more questions, make sure to leave a comment below.